Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this is the Hyundai IONIQ 5. Now Hyundai has already had a decent amount of success when it comes to electric vehicles with the IONIQ and Kona Electric. However, those cars were limited to what they could truly be as EVs because they were built on platforms designed originally to incorporate an internal combustion engine. So the Hyundai Group created the Electric Global Modular Platform, essentially a platform that will be used by all three companies to build their electric vehicles on. And there's a huge amount of customization and adaptability with that platform. Now we've already had the first three cars arrive on that platform, the Genesis GV60, the Kia EV6 and this, the IONIQ 5, which is actually the first car to arrive on that platform. And it has been a massive success for the Korean brand, winning several Car of the Year awards. So naturally, I've got the IONIQ 5 for a week, and I'm going to let you know what all the fuss is about and if it's deserving of that Car of the Year accolade. Now, when it comes to styling, I have said before that if you're a company bringing out your first ground up EV, you've got to be bold with its styling because everyone's bringing out EVs and you want people to take notice. And my word, have Hyundai been bold with the IONIQ 5. It looks like a concept car, but in a good way. I mean, it looks like a retro design from the 1980s to what cars in 2020 will look like. It also looks like, yes, an electric Lancia Delta Integrale, and I think that's a really flattering comment for the car. But it also looks like an electric vehicle. We've got no grills at the front. We've just got a number of panels which just integrate really nicely into the design. There's a lot of pixel lights being used, which gives it that kind of 80s retro feel, but I really do like it. It's a brilliant feature on the car. Now, in terms of the front, we have got a little bit of function because at the bottom we have got these slats that open up to cool the electric motor, and if you've watched my presentation of the IONIQ 6, you'll see them working to full effect in a warm studio. Granted, they'll probably be working overtime today, but it's all the little styling features I love on the IONIQ 5. Now firstly, the alloy wheels on this premium are 19 inches, and yes, they've got this nice kind of petal star effect to them, which I know is not going to be to everyone's taste, but as I'll let you know later, they really do add to the comfort levels of the car. I love this kind of satin plastic trim here going across the front of the grille, and actually what I love as well is that's actually a light bar that comes to life at night, and it does give the IONIQ 5 its iconic look at the front. Even the daytime running lights I really love, and I actually heard that there's around 250 small little kind of LED light bulbs that are used to make up those daytime running lights, which is really cool. And then we got the back of the car, which is again where the kind of retro look really does stand out, again with those pixel lights. But even at night we've got a light bar going across the rear of the car. But that's not like the highlight of the styling, it's just the way it's presented. It just looks really cool. But yeah, I absolutely love the IONIQ 5 styling. As I said, I know it's not to everyone's taste, but even if you don't like it, as it drives past, you got to give it a second glance. But let me know what you think of the IONIQ 5's design in the comment section below. And at that point, I think it's now time we have a look on the interior. Sat in the front of the IONIQ 5, you are greeted by a very funky, incredibly comfortable and well screwed together interior. It really is a lovely place to be. Now, one thing I will mention is that the IONIQ 5 is actually much larger than its pictures would suggest, so some people have called it a bit of a crossover or small SUV. Now, I refuse to go down that road. In fact, I'm just going to call this a mega hatchback because the design of it is that it is a hatchback. So what that means is that you have got a slightly raised seating position, so getting in and out of the IONIQ 5 is actually easier than a traditional hatchback. So if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, then definitely look at the IONIQ 5. And then once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that these seats are incredibly comfortable. They really do hold a big bear like me in place, and there is a huge amount of adjustment, even on the passenger seat as well. Also, they are heated, and we also get a heated steering wheel at the same time, so that is really handy, but not really useful on a day like today. Now also getting the perfect driving position is easy because, as I said, there's plenty of adjustment, and also in the wheel with both rake and reach adjustment, which is really handy. Interior quality is really good in here as well. We've got soft touch plastics here on top of the dash. However, on top of the doors, it is hard scratchy plastic, but what I like is that it actually has a nice kind of feel to it, and because it's quite wide, I can still rest my arm on it and it's not uncomfortable, so that I really do like. Now on the centre armrest we have got leather here, and we have got cloth seats on this premium trim, but they do actually feel of a nice quality, which is really handy. And then yes, on some parts of the centre dash we have got some more soft touch plastics here, and here on the centre console it is again hard scratchy plastics, but it does feel very durable, which is nice as well. Also we've got a leather steering wheel, which does feel really lovely in your hands. So yes, for around £40,000 you're probably thinking I would expect a bit more in terms of soft touch plastics, but don't forget, this being an EV, a lot of that money has gone on the battery and the electric vehicle technology, so because there is a lot of technology packed in this car. Cubby spaces in the IONIQ 5 are actually really good in here. So we have got some decent sized door pockets. You can get a ½ litre bottle of drink in there, but they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. Now on the centre kind of console area and here on the dash, we have got a few really quirky storage areas. Now we've got one here kind of in the footwell or in the centre area of the floor, where you have got a USB charging input and a 12-volt socket. But I think Hyundai have gone and seen some psychics, because when you've got your phone connected up to Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you can put your phone in there and you can't really get to it whilst you're driving. And that's really handy, because at the beginning of 2022 there's been a change in the law in the UK where you can't actually pick up your phone and look at it, because that is now technically breaking the law. So I really do love that feature, because it means you can't look at your phone and you can just go via the touchscreen using Apple CarPlay, which is really handy. Now here on the centre console we have got two cup holders. They are of a decent size and they are rubber lined as well. However, if you've got any small bottles, they will wobble around in there, and in perhaps a well, quite a tight corner, they could fall out, so just be aware of that. But any kind of coffee cups and stuff will fit in there really nicely. Now just behind there we've got a massive kind of storage area, which is rubber lined, which I love. We've got two USB charging inputs and also wireless charging, which is really handy. So actually altogether in this area here we can charge up to 5 devices, which I think is pretty damn good. Now we've also got your centre armrest here, which does lift up, but also we've got a bit of extra storage space as well, and it is again rubber lined. However, if you do put any items in there and then you do lift up the armrest, you are going to hear them rattle around a bit, so just be aware of that. Now with the glove box, we don't actually have a traditional glove box, we have a glove tray, which I really do like. It is of a really decent size, and what I love as well is you can put things like iPads in there, and you know, compared to a glove box, that they're not going to get crushed as you close it, so there's no kind of threat in your mind that that's going to happen. So I really do love that feature. So yeah, when it comes to interior cubby spaces, it's really good here in the IONIQ 5, and I am very impressed with them. Now with this being an electric vehicle, of course we haven't got too many physical buttons in here. However, Hyundai have been smart and they've not put every feature and function into that 12.3-inch touchscreen display. So on the dashboard we have got several shortcut buttons here, along with a volume knob as well. We have got a physical start-stop button, which is quite handy. However, going into the electric kind of age, especially with Tesla and Polestar, I would love us to be in this position where all we have to do is put our foot on the brake, put it into drive, and away we go. But that's something we might see in the future when it comes to kind of the IONIQ range and it advances. Now we have got the steering wheel, which has got a number of touch sensitive controls, but they do feel like physical buttons as well. They just light up from underneath. And then we have got a couple of rocker switches as well, a physical button for the drive mode select, and then finally a couple of buttons here, including an electric handbrake. Now I will mention as well that the actual drive select is here on a stalk sticking out of the side of the steering column, but it is kind of out of the way and it does give to this kind of clean interior feel to it. So I do like that feature there. But yeah, and then finally we got some buttons here on the door to operate your windows. but yeah, everyone's got those already. So it's quite nice to see that Hyundai haven't completely done away with all buttons in here, and it's actually really handy when you're driving along because it makes it easy to use when you're on the move. Now next we have got your dual zone climate control, which is actually on a touchscreen display here. Now some people might be saying, well, it's a bit fiddly and awkward to use, but actually no, you get used to it very quickly. You can set it so that it's just focusing on the driver, especially if you've got no passengers with you and on a day like today. But you quickly get used to where all those buttons are, and it's easy to operate when on the move. So again, that's something I really do like from Hyundai. So when it comes to the infotainment and dashboard display, we've got two 12.3 inch screens here. So we've got one in front of the steering wheel, which is your digital dashboard display, and it is really lovely and clear and presents you with a lot of information, but without completely bombarding you, so it makes it really confusing to read when on the move. Then in the center, we have got your other 12.3 inch display. It's a touch screen only. And if you have driven a Kia or Hyundai product over the last couple of years or so, it will feel very familiar to you. The icons are nice and easy to read, and it is actually easy to navigate the menus even when you're on the move. And the sat-nav system is pretty responsive, and you know what, it's a little bit more responsive than one of the ICE cars I drove last year, which was the Hyundai Tucson. So it is a really nice, easy to use display. As I mentioned, you've got your Apple CarPlay, so that is really handy. So when it comes to the steering wheel controls, it's really nice and easy to use. On the left hand side, we have got your audio and communication controls, and we have got like a dedicated star button which you can set to how you'd like. And then on the right hand side, we've got your digital dashboard menu display and operating system, as well as your adaptive cruise and driver aid controls. And they are really easy to use when on the move and nice and clear and functional. So I do like that as well. And then we have got a couple of flappy paddles on the back of the steering wheel, and that adjusts your regenerative braking. I hope I said that correctly, but I'll go on to that a little bit later in the review. So all in all, when it comes to the interior of the IONIQ 5, I really do like it. If there are any negatives to kind of point out, well, it's just me being picky, but I don't like the fact that the screens here are white. I would like them to be black to match the dashboard, but that's only a minor niggle that I've noticed, and really it's just an aesthetic thing. But other than that, no, I really do like this interior. Now I will mention that if you go up to the ultimate trim or the top of the range, this center console is actually movable, because what you can do with the seats is actually turn them into kind of lounge chairs, which are perfect for perhaps when you're waiting for your car to charge. Now on that note, I think that's enough of looking at the front of the IONIQ 5. Let's see what it's like in the back. Sat in the back of the IONIQ 5, it is actually really spacious and very comfortable back here. I could easily do a long journey sat in the back of the IONIQ 5. Now that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a huge amount of knee room, and headroom is nice and generous as well because of that squared off roof design. However, if you are 6 foot and taller, you might find your head rubbing against the headlining, but it doesn't feel too claustrophobic back here because of that brighter headlining material, and also the windows are massive and do allow a good amount of light in. It's just a little bit disappointing that they don't open all the way down. Now when it comes to cubby spaces, it's actually really good back here as well. We've got some decent sized door pockets. We can get a half-litre bottle of drink in there. We've also got these little kind of slats here, and same as the front as well, which act as door handles, but at the same time you could perhaps put your mobile phone in there so you know it's not going to get lost on a journey, and perhaps you could take a little kip or something. So that's actually really handy. We've also got a little kind of cubby space where you could put your phone in there as well if you're using one of the two USB charging inputs. And then of course we have got your center armrest with a couple of extra cup holders, which is really handy. And then when it comes to kids, we have got two ISOFIX supports on the outer seats, and there's no plastic covers, but it is quite easy to affix a child seat in there. You just can find the bar really easy. And then we've also got a couple of vents here on the B pillar, which I think are actually really handy, particularly on a day like today. So it does help with keeping your rear passengers cool, because there are no vents on the back of the center armrest. So that's just something to be aware of there. But yeah, there's also a bit more versatility in the seats as well. So firstly, I can slide the seats forward to increase the boot area. But as you can see, I've still got a little bit of knee space there, which is very handy. And also, If I move in back, we can also recline the seats as well, and you can actually move the tonneau cover back a little bit further so you can recline the seats even more, so you can have a little kip back here as well. And then finally, if you are sat in the back and perhaps you want to charge up, say, a laptop, you have actually got a 12-volt socket between the two seats, so that is again really handy and actually very versatile for the IONIQ 5. So just like the upcoming IONIQ 6, where you can sit in the front with your laptop, you can sit in the back of the IONIQ 5 and perhaps have your laptop here on your lap and be working whilst it's charging at the same time. I really do love that feature. So all in all, sat in the back of the IONIQ 5, it's very spacious, very comfortable, actually comes with a lot of kit as well, and just feels like a lovely place to be. So I think that's enough for sitting here in the back of the IONIQ 5. Let's see what that boot is like. So now onto the boot of the IONIQ 5, and when you get it open, you are presented by 527 litres of space, which is actually a very decent boot capacity. It is better than the likes of the Mustang Mach-E, but not quite as good as the Skoda Enyaq or Volkswagen ID4. But those last two cars are more considered as SUVs, especially in their shape. But when you get the boot open, the first thing that hits you is you might think, well, it's actually quite shallow and it doesn't look like 527 litres. But you have got a massive wide square load area, so it does actually appear a bit smaller than what it actually is, but it is still very, very useful and very handy. You can easily get a couple of suitcases in there or a few weekend bags. Now, it's not devoid of features either. We have got a few tethering hooks. Surprisingly, we haven't got a 12-volt socket, but as I mentioned earlier, we can move the tonneau cover back a bit so you can recline the rear seats a bit further if your rear passengers want to take a nap. Now, we have under the boot floor got a bit of additional space where you can get your 2K lots of charging cables in there, and we've also got your V to L adapter in there as well as your tyre puncture repair kit, so that is really handy. And I will go on to the V2L in a moment. But not only that, we have actually got a frunk on the IONIQ 5 as well. Now, because this particular car is rear-wheel drive, it means we've got a 52-litre frunk. However, if you go for the all-wheel drive version, that drops to less than half. So that's just something to be aware of. Also, if you do put the rear seats down, you do have an almost completely flat load area, which is really handy for loading large bulky items. However, I can't seem to find a way to put that tonneau cover under the boot lid, which is a little bit disappointing. But all in all, when it comes to the practicality side of the IONIQ 5, it is actually a very practical car, and yeah, you're gonna have no issues with it whatsoever, even if you are traveling on a long journey as well. But you know what, I think that's enough of looking at this boot capacity. Let's have a talk about the V2L and then take it for a drive. So what is vehicle to load? Well, essentially it's this little bag here. And what you get in this little bag is this very quirky looking adapter. Now, essentially what this means is that you can power items from your car. In fact, you can even go as far as to say you can actually charge other cars using this adapter. And it's a really novel and useful feature. And in fact, when we had Storm Eunice and Franklin here earlier in the UK, and there were massive blackouts going around the country, those who had IONIQ 5s were actually powering things like fridge freezers purely using this adapter and using their car as a power source. And I think that is a really novel feature. So all you've got to do is take off the lid, open up your charging port and plug her in. And then with a little pinch here, that's where you affix your 3-pin socket. And you've probably heard a little pinging going on the inside of the car, so that's acknowledging that the adapter is now fitted to the car, and you can go ahead and power electrical items with it. I think that is bloody brilliant and just goes to show the versatility of electric vehicles. I think more and more manufacturers are going to come out with these V2L adapters very soon of their own. But anyway, I wanted to just show you guys that very quickly. Let's take the IONIQ 5 for a drive now. So once you get driving in the IONIQ 5, first impressions are brilliant. I mean, it's incredibly comfortable, it's very quiet and very refined at the same time. Also, it's very easy to drive. You do, after about 2 or 3 minutes of driving, you understand why the IONIQ 5 has received so much hype, and definitely feels as though it is deserving of those Car of the Year awards. Now, when it comes to visibility, for the most part, it is actually really good. Now, as I said, this is more of a mega hatchback than an SUV or crossover, so you have got a slightly raised seating position. So I've got a great view of the road ahead. The A-pillars are not too thick, so I've not looked around them at any junctions. And if I look over my shoulder, that's where you see that there is quite a pronounced C-pillar there. However, I have got blind spot monitoring on this car, and then rear visibility is really good. Now, as I've already mentioned, yes, in the winter time or when it's been raining, that rear visibility can be hampered with rain and muck and stuff sitting on the rear screen, but we've already covered that. So yeah, first impressions of the IONIQ 5 once you get driving, yeah, it's really good. Now, there are 2 trim levels to choose from in the IONIQ 5 range. There's the entry-level premium, which is what I've got here, and the top of the range ultimate. And personally, I'd stick with the premium, because you've got the choice of going for the smaller battery or the larger battery. You've got, in terms of kit, as standard, everything that you would want or need. Your only optional extras are a heat pump, metallic paint, and even if you go for the ultimate, you still got a heat pump as an optional extra. I mean, yeah, you're not needing for anything. I've got front and rear parking sensors. I've got a reversing camera, dual zone climate control, Apple CarPlay. I've got built-in sat-nav and all the gubbins that you would get with a modern day car. I'm really not missing out. So yeah, that would be my choice. Go for the premium. It's not too expensive, really, when compared to other rivals out there. So you do save yourself a good bit of money, but you also have a car that has a very decent range and very good charging capabilities. Now, when it comes to battery choices with the IONIQ 5, it gets a little bit confusing because there is a battery change happening coming later in 2022. So basically, I'm going to have to put some details on the screen for you. So here you go. When you could buy the IONIQ 5, originally there were 2 batteries available. There was a 58 kilowatt hour battery and a 73 kilowatt hour battery. So if you had that 58 kilowatt hour battery, what that essentially meant is that you had 168 brake horsepower, a range of around 238 miles, and a 0 to 60 time of 8.5 seconds. So you can now get the 77 kilowatt hour battery that you've seen in cars like the EV6 and the GV60. So technically it's a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery, but what that does, again, it means that you can have it with rear wheel drive and all wheel drive. And when it comes to power, that is increased. I think it's about 225 brake horsepower and 305 brake horsepower for the all wheel drive version. But when it comes to range, that now is increased and it's over the 300 mark. So that means now with the rear wheel drive version, we got a range of 315 miles. However, with the all wheel drive version, that's just a smidge under 300 at 298. And breathe. So I've given you all the information and gumph about the batteries and the performance of those batteries. But what about charging? Well, this is another highlight to the IONIQ 5 where we have got supercharging capability. So I'm going to put up on the screen now what the other charging times are, and with the IONIQ 5 you can go from 10 to 80% in just 18 minutes. That is phenomenal, and that does beat a number of its key German rivals having that ability to charge that rapidly and that quickly. So that's something I really do love about the IONIQ 5, and it means that if you have to do a long journey in this car, you don't have to stop for too long. Now granted, there aren't a huge number of superchargers around here in the UK, but if you can get yourself to one, then you're definitely in a good position in terms of moving forward with your journey. So that's just something to highlight on the IONIQ 5. That's supercharging capability that even some of its more premium rivals haven't got. Now, I mentioned earlier on the interior of the IONIQ 5 that we got these flappy paddles on the back of the steering wheel. Now, they are not to adjust any of the gearing because there's no gears in this electric car. They are to adjust the strength of the regenerative braking. And it basically goes from 0, which is coast mode, and I mean this thing will coast for Korea, it just keeps on going, and you go all the way to I pedal, essentially, where one pedal driving, where you shouldn't need to put your foot on the brake pedal. However, for around about 85 to 90% of the time, that is very much the case. So what's the ride, refinement and handling like in the IONIQ 5? Well, ride-wise, it's absolutely brilliant. I am hugely impressed by it. With those 19-inch alloy wheels, and 19 inches aren't small, it rides beautifully. I mean, yes, you can feel some of the bumps and imperfections come through into the cabin, but you really have to hit some big potholes in order to really have it affect the ride and really make it feel uncomfortable. A lot of the times, driving through a few of these villages, if I've gone over any kind of potholes and that, or any small kind of ruts in the road, I can hear them, but I can't feel them. These seats do take a massive chunk of the vibration and that away from your body, which I think is really good. And it means that when you go on a long journey in your IONIQ, it's a lovely, relaxed, refined journey, and you get to your destination feeling nice and calm. It really is a brilliant long-range cruiser. On the motorways, this just rides beautifully. And then we got the refinement side. So of course, yes, this being an EV, there's no engine up front, but this also being a bespoke EV and a ground-up designed one, it means that the engineers and everything, when they've gone around the car, they've made sure to take away the noises that you would probably hear if you weren't listening to that engine. So wind noise, there's hardly any from the wing mirrors and the A-pillar. That's a lovely surprise. In terms of actual noise intrusion, a little bit of tyre roar, that's it. But once you get driving at 70 miles an hour, this thing just settles down. It's really comfortable, it's relaxing, it's just a joy. And you can just put on the driving aids, the adaptive cruise, the lane keep assist, the drive aid assist, and you've again got a more comfortable ride, relaxing ride, because the car is taking away some of that workload for you. So this just becomes an epically comfortable cruiser, and I really do love it for that. And then we go on to the performance and the handling. So we have got a drive mode button here. I am going to put it into sport because, you know, to try and highlight what the car can do. So if I put my foot down, nice bit of acceleration, not gone over the speed limit, which is really handy, even though that felt actually much quicker. But in the corners, this is really lovely. There's an agility to it, which I didn't expect to kind of feel, but there's weight in the steering. I do feel a bit of a connection to the wheels up front, so when I turn and it does react. There's a little bit of body lean in the corners, not a huge amount, but it just kind of lets you know if you are pushing the car too hard. But no, the handling's lovely, and in the parking it's really lovely and light, so it makes it a doddle to park. Even though I will say, this being quite a big car, it does mean that you have to kind of make sure you're within the lines, because you're going to be very close to being on one side or the other, because it is quite a wide car as well. But no, I mean, in terms of just the driving dynamics as a whole, it's brilliant. So what have been some of the highlights and some of the low points I've experienced living with the IONIQ 5 this week? Well, I'm going to be honest, there are hardly any low points. I mean, yes, some of the interior plastics are a bit hard and a bit cheap feeling, especially for the price of the car, But do you know what? There are no creaks, there are no rattles in here, and it's just very comfortable. Yes, I know we've got cloth seats here, but do you know what? I kind of prefer these to the leather ones. They feel extremely comfortable. They really do hold me in place, and I mean that in a good way. My kidneys aren't being pinched, and they're not sport seats, but they are really supportive. And then we've got things like the exterior looks. I think this car looks brilliant. I know it's not to everyone's taste, but I really do love the looks of it. If I was going to compare it to the other cars from Hyundai Group, I think this looks better than a Kia EV6, and depending on the colours on the GV60, it can look a little bit better than that car as well. However, if Genesis loaned me a GV60 and it's bright yellow with a blue leather interior, then that just trumps everything. But going back to the IONIQ 5, I think this just looks epically cool, and I really do love that. Yeah, I've had no faults with the IONIQ 5. I've already just mentioned them, really, and they're only tiny niggles. So I think it's time we move on to the conclusion. So what are my thoughts on the Hyundai IONIQ 5? 2 words: bloody brilliant. I think this is the whole package for an electric vehicle. I love the looks, granted not everyone will. It's incredibly comfortable on this interior. It's well kitted out. It drives, rides and handles beautifully. You've got class-leading charging capabilities. You have a very decent range as well, and then you've got plenty of rear passenger space and boot capacity as well. What is not to like? Hyundai have been bold, they've been brash, and it has paid dividends for them, because this, I completely understand why this has been car of the year for so many magazines and stuff of last year. I think this is the whole package. I think if you are after an electric vehicle that you want to use every day and take your family, this is the one to go for. And I know at £41,000 starting, it might not be in everyone's reach, but do you know what? Go down to your local dealership, just have a little look and just see if it is. There are leasing opportunities out there available where you can get one of these for a very decent monthly cost, because I don't want you to miss out. This is arguably, this could be my car of the year, I think, maybe. Even though it came out last year, I had this year. I think as a whole package, yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. And that's my thoughts on the IONIQ 5. It's an absolutely bloody brilliant car. There, I've said it. So as always, guys, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell notifications icon, lets you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so follow on there as well for additional content. You get to see cars and things that I might not be able to view. Did you know I've seen the new Noble M500? Yep, in prototype form. So you might want to, you know, check Twitter and check Instagram. But guys, anyway, have yourselves a wonderful day. Look after yourselves. Put a hat on, put some sunscreen on if it's hot where you are. And I will see you all in the next video. So, take care everybody, and bye-bye.